Robert very, very much touched so many people.
Michelle's son, Robert, was shot and killed on Seattle's Capitol Hill on September 17th.
I've cried for 74 days.
And she's calling on city leaders to curb street violence in one of Seattle's most populated neighborhoods.
The most vulnerable people over here are getting attacked.
I see progress and room for improvement.
Police say they have work to do, but neighborhood crime is down.
So we've had a great deal of success when it comes to investigating gun violence.
And yet, plans to open a new crisis care center in the old polyclinic building has some neighbors concerned, even with broad agreement that more drug and mental health treatment is urgently needed.
I think public safety is top of mind for everyone.
Plus, Capitol Hill restaurants are struggling to hang on as their neighbors go under.
I think we're at a crossroads right now.
How are city leaders responding to growing community concerns?
Any life that's lost in the city is too much.
Our panel weighs in.
We've been having a lot of challenges with broken glass.
Confronting challenges on Capitol Hill.
Policing alone will not fix this.
Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. After a series of deadly shootings over the past few months on Capitol Hill, the families of gun violence victims and local businesses are looking for answers from the city of Seattle. The mayor and city council have responded with a new public safety plan, including added outreach from crisis care teams and more police patrols. The SPD says overall crime statistics in this neighborhood and across Seattle are falling. But these gun violence cases and other persistent signs of street disorder are fueling a perception that Seattle is unsafe, a perception city leaders and neighborhood advocates are fighting to change.
I've cried for 74 days.
Michelle Reese's 26-year-old son, Robert Fleeks Jr., was shot and killed near the corner of 10th and Pike more than 2 months ago. Yet the tears keep coming.
And it's hurtful, hurtful to the core.
It's been hurtful to Reese, the Capitol Hill neighborhood, and beyond. Fleek's murder, which police say stemmed from an argument Fleek had with someone he knew, happened less than 3 weeks before another fatal shooting, just a few blocks away.
Gun violence overall in the city is a problem.
Though one arrest has been made in her son's case, Reese is worried the others involved in the crime may try to retaliate against her.
I've brought it up before to the advocates that I am very concerned for my own safety and my family's safety.
We need to do a better job making people feel safe.
Captain Jim Britt is the commander of the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct, which runs from Lake Washington up to Capitol Hill. He says that crime rates in every category are falling precinct-wide, but the statistics don't tell the whole story.
And you can't stand in front of a person who is just a victim of a crime and tell them, yeah, but crime is down. So while crime may be down, the appearance of crime, how people feel about it, is sometimes more important than just the numbers.
Britt, a 23-year SPD veteran who's new to the East Precinct leadership job, says new surveillance cameras coming soon near Pike and Pine, plus a renewed effort towards community-wide communications will help prevent criminal activity and change the public's perception of safety on Capitol Hill.
The downstream effect of that is word gets out that this isn't the place you want to go to commit your crimes.
I think we're really hopeful with some new leadership of the East Precinct.
Ellen Greene, executive director of the First Hill Improvement Association, is reckoning with gun violence, open-air drug deals, and many other similar concerns to what she calls a sister hill in the Capitol Hill neighborhood.
Public safety is top of mind for everyone.
She lives next door to Harborview Medical Center and sees this area as a place of healing, especially with a new crisis care clinic going into the old polyclinic building, offering help to people in crisis with no appointment and no insurance necessary.
I've heard the whole range from absolutely not right here to please can we have it yesterday.
And more resources are coming to this neighborhood, from a 5-point plan for added public safety investments from City Council member Joy Hollingsworth to Seattle Theater Group's revitalization of Cary Hall.
I think the economic development piece is especially important.
Linda DeLello Morton owns Terra Plata, a restaurant near Pike and Melrose. She says her neighborhood is at a crossroads.
We definitely aren't there yet in terms of public safety issues, but I do think that there's been progress made the last few years.
The hot issue for her right now? Making sure city leaders are keeping an eye on not just crime, but local business health too, as a key to Seattle's success.
It activates neighborhoods, which is what we need. I think that's a critical piece to having a vibrant city and to having less public safety issues.
In one of Seattle's most densely populated and diverse neighborhoods, creating a vibrant city is a shared goal, with many voices anxious to see some progress.
What is being done?
And joining us to further discuss these issues of public safety on Capitol Hill, we have with us Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, the representative from District 3, which covers Capitol Hill, First Hill, the Central District, and so much more. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We also have with us Chris Paulus, chair of the Capitol Hill Community Council. Chris, great to have you here too.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Also with us, Chief Amy Barden of Seattle's Care Department, Community Assisted Response and Engagement. Care handles the city's 911 calls, also is in charge of the care teams of civilian crisis responders that are now working citywide. Chief Barden, a pleasure as always.
Good to be back.
Chris, let me start with you and get your help identifying some of the main concerns you have when it comes to public safety on Capitol Hill. We touched on gun violence, open-air drug deals, and general street disorder in our setup piece. These are issues in just about every part of the city, but I think in a densely populated area like Capitol Hill, they can really hit home. Talk to me about this. What problems are you hearing about from community?
I'm hearing a lot of problems, with exactly what you just said, the open-air drug use, some of the crime, theft issues that kind of go along with that, and then violent crime as well, and just how that goes into people's minds of how they perceive, what's going on.
Yeah, crime numbers are one thing, perception is another, right?
Exactly. A shooting is going to be covered, everywhere, and you're going to think about that, and that's going to cause people to think, or maybe have second thoughts about going out and doing something, and that leads into the next piece of perception. So there's definitely issues, and it's also challenging, in an area as diverse as Capitol Hill. You have the Pike and Pine corridor, and that's entirely different from areas of North Capitol Hill. But we all got to try to figure out how to balance that all together.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Councilmember Hollingsworth, we're going to talk about your 5-point plan to respond to some of these issues in a bit, but I do want to talk about what prompted you to get there. There was a deadly shooting on October 9th. Jaden Jamison was killed, and this was about 3 weeks after another deadly shooting where Robert Fleeks Jr. was killed. I have two questions. What spurred you into action that night in October? And also, what do you say to families who've been victimized by gun violence who say the city hasn't done right by them?
Yeah, so let me first address, any life that's lost in the city is too much. And it's something that I take very personally when people are gunned down to gun violence. And then the aftermath of that, it's not only that person, it's sometimes I know the family, sometimes I also know the community, and that's unfortunate. The things that we've been dealing with on Capitol Hill that Chris had mentioned are stuff that we came into. We inherited. It was a lot of things that were happening.
When you came into office.
Absolutely,
yeah.
2 years ago. And then the other piece to that, we see a lot of mental health crisis going on Capitol Hill and First Hill. I don't want to forget First Hill as well. That's they're joined at the hip. They're joined at the hip.
Yep.
And also to some of the traffic safety issues that are going on the Hill. And so there are a whole different things. The 5-point plan that we talked about, and I'm more than happy to dive into detail, but the piece that spurred that wasn't necessarily someone got killed on gun violence. This is stuff that we have heard from the community that they've wanted since day one, things that we know that will continue to help the community move forward in our efforts to create safe environment, a holistic approach.
Yeah.
And then also stuff that we had in the works, whether when you're governing, you have governance, you have, we're also doing budget stuff as well. And so as a council member, I'm responsible for those two things as well.
Okay. Chief Barden, I wanted to make sure I talked about what the data is telling us when it comes to public safety on Capitol Hill. Are there more calls for service? Is there more crime in that neighborhood? What is the care department seeing? What trends are you keeping an eye on?
Yeah, it's not going well, right? I run 911, and what we see uniquely is this sort of wash, rinse, repeat, right? You have very few people causing harm, but they're causing a lot of harm. And I always talk about, you've got a coercive system, right? So you've got law enforcement and jails and the criminal legal system that is not designed to break these cycles. It's not. It's not rehabilitating people generally. And then you've got the voluntary system, behavioral health crisis, right? Social services, community-based organizations who are also not adequately funded, or there's not a good reimbursement model to get people the help that they need. And so, I often say it's going to be hard if you're in a decades-long pattern or you have a really profound mental health issue. We're not going to solve that in 72 hours. And, so these are structural things that need to change. Policing alone will not fix this. It will not, nor will a crisis care center. We need consistent leadership and investment in the interventions that will actually break the cycle for people.
Let's talk about this 5-point plan a little bit further, because part of the plan involves expanding the reach of care teams, these civilian crisis responders, I should say. I know you're calling for more of a police presence too, plus maybe an ambassador program like Chinatown ID has going on. Talk about this plan, what you were able to get. I know this during the budget process this was tough, but talk about this plan and what's coming out of it.
Yeah, so have a great relationship with Chief Barden and care team, and they've been doing a phenomenal job within their boundaries that they're restrictive in. And so talked about expanding that piece and making sure that, we have a visible presence as well, and SPD, the East Precinct, to have more of a visible presence out in the community, and that's whether that's on bike, on foot, just being visible, introducing themselves to folks. The second piece, and I took notes here, the King County Crisis Care Clinic is coming to Capitol Hill. So we we give a big shout out to Dembowski, to Balducci, to Mosqueda, and then
King County Council
members, and then also the King County Executive, Zahalai, because they were able to secure $1 million in funding. We sent a letter and asked for more, and we were able to get $2 million total for that, which is great. The third thing, the Capitol Hill ambassadors, that was last year that we secured, so those will be implemented next year as well. We have a safety coordinator that we were able to secure funding for last year. They've been up and running for a year through the GSBA. Fourth thing, sanctioned encampments. That was a big thing. We need more low barrier entry levels to take people off the street and get them into help. Sometimes people can't. We want to be able to meet people where they are.
Tiny houses? What are we talking about?
Tiny houses. It could be it could be tiny houses. It could be like tent city where you have different resources available. We want all the resources to get people into shelter. And last but not least, the environmental designs that we're really big on: cleaning of bike lanes, lighting, signage, just making it feel safer. And that's something that we can control, the cleanliness of Capitol Hill.
Got it. Chris, you're hearing this. I wanted to know what you think about this plan and what role will the community council play in it.
Well, I think the community council, one of the places that it plays is the fact that it can bring the neighborhood and the community together to engage with those city groups and those city organizations. So many times I hear from groups, or from individuals that they don't know that this service is available from the city, or that the city's, why can't the city do this? And the answer is, well, actually, they're already doing that. And so the more that we can kind of, allow that and make it easier for the city to keep doing some of the great things and encourage them to do certain things a little bit better, I think is a big piece for it. Really the answer is all of it and more. I think all of those pieces that were brought up in the 5-point plan, nobody's going to say that we have done enough of that. So I'm going to just echo, that and more.
Okay, got it. Chief Barden, I know that a lot has been happening with CARE this year. CARE teams, these crisis responders, now working citywide. The number of those teams will be doubled thanks to a $9.5 million investment in the recent city budget. You got a new headquarters on First Hill for your East Precinct team, and recently, after some negotiations between the city and the Seattle Police Officers Guild, CARE teams will now be able to respond on their own in some cases, meaning they won't have to go with police on calls through what's called a dual dispatch system. What are these changes to CARE going to mean for public safety on Capitol Hill, maybe citywide? Where do you want to take this?
Yeah, every time I can send CARE responders to a call and free up law enforcement, that's a win. Every single time. So simply thought of, if it's 10,000 calls we've been to, which it has, and it's about an hour on a call, that's 10,000 hours back to law enforcement. We've been operating for 26 months now with no incident. So we've called law enforcement back a couple times to help us. Generally, if we think somebody might be escalating, but it's, again, a fraction of 1% that's happened. So we know that this is safe and we know that it's effective. There is no path to public safety without building out civilian response. There's just not. even at the high water mark for SPD, you know, when they were closer to 1,500 in that department, you still had a 72-minute response time to priority 3 calls. Priority 3, those are the crisis calls. Those are the folks that we see who are not doing well. Yeah, that's exactly right, where we know this is probably going to get worse if we don't get somebody out here to intervene. And so it's just a false narrative that, again, you could staff up SPD and then everything would be fine. It never was. We have cities like Boston with 3,100 officers. There's still crime, right? And so I think that's what people are starting to understand, that you can't talk about public safety without talking about our unsheltered neighbors, the impact to their safety when they're living outside, and without talking about addiction and rates of substance use. And I always say, anybody who's doing crimes, who's causing harm or self-destructing, that is mental health. There's a mental or behavioral health issue. That's not a healthy person, right? And so we have got to get over this idea that there's bad people and then there's good people. There's just people. And when somebody is doing something destructive, we need to intervene in a way that, again, helps the person to repattern.
There's been a lot of talk of some surveillance cameras coming in the area. Do you have any insight on when those are actually going to be going in around Pike Pine and what kind of difference they could make?
Yeah, I believe you talked to Captain Britt about this. Right. I've watched the development, sort of the reemergence and investment in the Real-Time Crime Center. I, like most Seattleites, I'm very trepidatious about surveillance. I'm also very pro-tech, right? So I think you need outstanding governance measures. You need very ethical leaders to have oversight of technology. But if you want to mitigate especially discrimination and bias in law enforcement and in 911, then you use tech, right? And so I like drones as first responders actually for that reason. I know it's better to have more information, so I know even who to send to begin with. But as far as deployment, you would have to ask Captain Britt.
Okay.
Or Joy, do you know?
Yeah, what do we got?
Yeah, good question. That would be definitely a Captain Britt.
Okay, we're still working on it. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. But, you know, like Chief Barden said, like, I voted on the use of the cameras for us to help solve violent crimes. Full stop. Yeah. The additional stuff, and I know like other folks have, you know, concerns about federal overreach. Yeah. Not one person on the council wants that. And so, you know, we try to put in different guardrails to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we'll be watching closely and getting reports from SPD, making sure that that does not happen. But those are some of the things that we heard. And it's a split. We know it was a very tenuous conversation. And we want to make sure that we are implementing that correctly so we can have a positive impact on the community.
Chris, any thoughts about surveillance cameras?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue, you know, and especially we're just, you know, putting together plans for future meetings and Japanese American Remembrance Days coming up, I think, February 18th, you know, with the internment of the Japanese Americans during World War II. And I think, you know, surveillance cameras, you know, are something that, you know, unfortunately now, you know, is in that mix of that conversation. So I think it's a complicated issue and something that needs to be, you know, reviewed and oversight and, you know, look at those concerns because they are real.
Are you hearing that from the community? Is there pushback? What do we got?
Yeah, and I mean, like any diverse community, you're going to have like different points of view on this, but that's definitely one of the pieces that's been brought up, you know, with some of the, you know, federal actions that have been going on, you know, concerns about, you know, can this camera data, you know, actually be secured? Yeah. You know, and the different leaks, you know, that are available to it, and the speed of the rollout, you know, has concerned some people, you know, of how quickly it's rolled out. That being said, some people, of course, are upset that it's not rolling out faster.
I have a similar issue I want to talk about with you when it comes to the King County Crisis Care Center, which is set to go into the old Polyclinic building at Broadway and Union, a walk-in clinic for people in crisis, so no appointment, no insurance necessary. How are you approaching this new facility? Because I know some people are saying we want this yesterday. Others are saying we don't want this at all. How are you looking at this?
Well, so that's something that we're working, you know, along with First Hill and, you know, other community partners in figuring out ways to engage the community to help them to understand, you know, what's going on with the crisis center, you know, and what are those follow-up pieces. And I think one of the biggest concerns, you know, is that it's, you know, just like the borders of the neighborhoods are not as defined as people think they are. Right. You know, it's not that inside the building is one place and outside the building is an entirely different place. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns, you know, that people have is that, you know, the people who are running, you know, they just selected a partner to run that, provider to run that, you know, they're, from the community standpoint, you know, the responsibility of that building doesn't end as soon as the person enters the building or leaves the building. And that's one of our biggest concerns.
Can you speak to this? Because I know this issue has been brought up in front of the city council, the county council as well, this idea of people come to the clinic for services and then leave the facility and go where? Help me out with how the city's going to be working with the county on this, trying to make sure everyone's being a good neighbor here, I guess.
Absolutely. So I think for the general public should know that this is a regional center. This is not just for Seattle.
That's
so this is folks like throughout the region that will come to
Central
this.
King County.
Central King County.
Yep.
And so one of the things that we heard is that when people had concerns, it's not that they didn't want it. They wanted a properly cited crisis care clinic at the polyclinic. You know, when people, after they come in, where do they go? How do we get them that transition? We don't want, you know, things to exacerbate what's currently in the neighborhood.
Sure.
And for us in the county to recognize that there are serious issues on Capitol Hill and just actually say, hey, we actually understand there are issues and let's address that first. So you got a lot of that mix. You also had communication pieces that we needed to have better communication with folks, and that was at the county level. And we've had really tense conversations, but oftentimes when you are attacking these problems, it feels like you're bringing a mop to the ocean, and you're not, you know, we're not going anywhere. And so that's one thing that I listened to. I heard people and said, okay, what are some tangible goals and measurable goals that we can have? And one of them was we need funding to make sure that we can start to clean this up. Yeah. So when we're citing the crisis care clinic, we can start from a good place.
Okay. Chief Barden, can you shed some light on this? I know you're on King County Executive Gurmai Zahalai's transition team. It's an important issue for the county to get right here. What role will CARE, maybe other public safety partners, be playing as this crisis care center comes online?
Yeah, I was in a lot of those meetings as well, that debate, and I really like Executive Zahalai a lot. He, I think, shares my perspective that you've got to actually show up and listen to people and answer their questions in a forthright way. I can make a case for and I can make a case against, and we should have that conversation. I thought it was unfair anytime somebody raised a concern to go, oh, that's NIMBYism. Those are valid concerns, right? Again, just through the lens of 911 data, I know where my hot spots are. Yeah. And if you feel like we're not seeing any functional improvement in this neighborhood and you say we're going to add yet another vulnerable population, valid concern, have the conversation. And if the way the decision is made is, you know, that location is advantageous for these reasons and we're weighting these reasons more than these concerns, just say that. Yeah. Don't act like it's not a valid concern. And so I really like the leaders who have been recently elected, all of them. I think that they're very sincere in their engagement, and I think people want public servants that will show up and that will have a candid conversation about how these decisions are being made.
Do you have an idea of how public safety agencies like yours will be involved?
The piece that I am trying to solve for is, again, that exit strategy. Yeah. So I'm entering an MOU, an agreement right now with the King County Jail that people do not exit at 11 p.m. right back into crime or crisis. Just call us. Call CARE directly. We can come and at least try to get somebody to the right place, to the right resource, rather than setting them up for failure. So it's my intention to do the same thing with the crisis care centers. Again, county level, I want the whole county to have the same resources, basically. So the King County Sheriff's Office has a co-responder team. They can do the same thing in unincorporated King County.
Thank you for that. Chris, I want to talk about local business for a minute, if I could. We've seen a lot of established Capitol Hill spots closing in the past few months. I'm thinking about Skillet, Mom Noon, the Starbucks Roastery, just to name a few here. The restaurants who are hanging in there want to stay open. I've talked with a few of them. They want to keep their block activated, which can be a boost for public safety, too. What are you hearing from local businesses, and what kind of support are they asking for?
You know, we've been having a lot of challenges with, like, broken glass, you know, and I know the city has some programs, you know, to help with that, you know, and it's a question of whether or not the businesses are aware of those.
Yeah, storefront repair, you bet.
Storefront repair, and, you know, that it's challenging for the businesses, you know, late at night. You know, some of these crime issues, you know, they affect the way that people think they're going to do something or want to do something, which has that follow-on effect. You know, if the restaurant doesn't have enough people showing up, the restaurant's not going to stay open. We're just going to stop people from going to the restaurant that's next door. And so I think that's something that we, like as a community, you know, the city and all the different pieces in the county and everything, you know, really need to come together to figure out different ways, you know, different ways to engage that.
Yeah. Do you have some thoughts about this? I know you've been walking the district a lot too and talking to businesses.
A lot of it stems from the public safety piece, also the cleanliness of the city, lighting. Those things can change the mood.
There's been some economic issues too. I mean,
absolutely.
You can't overlook that.
You can't. Economic issues, there's inflation, there's food costs, there's labor, there's rent, there's so many different things that go into a business, operational
Yeah.
a whole bunch of stuff.
You can't pay their rent, but you could probably help fix their storefront,
Absolutely.
it sounds like.
You
Okay.
can, but you can also, if we have public safety at a certain level where maybe a business isn't getting broken into, they don't have to deal with mental health crisis that's spilling out on their streets.
Yeah.
Their workers feel safe to come to work. It's different in different neighborhoods. I'm dealing with in Eastlake, you have a lot of construction. I have businesses doing $200 for lunch, overall revenue because of the construction impact. So it's in different neighborhoods.
Okay.
It's different, and then you layer that all the other stuff on. It's not crime over there. It's the impact of construction.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different issues that we are having to navigate. But specifically on Capitol Hill with the crime, that is the number one thing that we hear from businesses, and just the broken glass from their business.
Okay, all right. We need to start wrapping up, and I want to try to figure out what kind of discussion you think we're going to be having about safety on Capitol Hill next year. Chief, can I start with you, and we'll go down the line?
We're going to solve it.
Okay, right.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah. No, I'm very optimistic right now about next year. I think that I think just the city and the county working closely together is going to change everything. Since I arrived, I thought, I think the city blames the county and the county blames the city for everything. And that is not appropriate, and it slows us down. I think that we're getting a much more nuanced understanding of the crisis population on the street, and that we do have an epidemic level of substance use in this city, and so we need to solve for that. SFD having buprenorphine, the Orca Center, that no wrong door into treatment. People are starting to self-refer.
Opioid deaths are going down.
Yeah, they are. And so I think that is the game changer, right? If we can get treatment to people, make it really, really easy, simplify the process, our city really will look different.
Okay.
Every time we intervene and break that cycle of addiction, you're saving a whole bunch of crimes and a lot of crisis and a lot of public safety dollars and a life.
Okay, yeah, which is what it's all centered on here.
Yeah.
Chris, some thoughts about where we're looking at this next year?
I think next year it's going to be super fun. We have Halloween coming up in October.
He's got the
for
calendar
Halloween.
going.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that activates people to keep these businesses is that it's a fun and it's an engaging place. And I love Seattle and I love Capitol Hill.
Yeah, talk to me about the public safety piece, though.
Yeah.
Where do you think we're going?
Well, I think the public safety piece kind of feeds into that. I think, the numbers are looking, better than they have been. And I think people's perception of that leads into that. The number of people I've seen, who've talked to me about seeing cop cars, around, but also knowing that there's other services that are available.
Right.
You can walk into the Capitol Hill Library right now and pick up Narcan, without having to engage with anybody.
Right.
And I think those pieces all lead to a better public safety, environment.
Okay. Councilmember Hollingsworth, I know you were talking about this right when you came into office. Where are we going to be on this issue next year? What do you think?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say, I love that the county and the city are going to be working hand in hand. I heard a joke. Someone said that there are the county and the city are two elephants looking at each other through a straw. So I want to remove the straw.
Okay.
So now we're just looking at each
Okay.
other. All right.
All right.
So that's the first piece. The second thing is we have ambassadors coming to Capitol Hill. We had a ton of investment where, after you do, last year, you do an investment for funding and money. Now you start seeing the programs happen. So 2026 is going to be great because let me tell you, it's the only way that we can improve Cap. We have to look up and ensure that we're making sure that we're meeting people's needs. But the other piece too that I want to highlight besides the ambassador is the safety coordinator that we have on Capitol Hill, just having a little bit more of a cohesive response to that as well so they can help elevate people's concerns.
All right, we will see what's next. Thank you for all of that, and we will be right back. What are people saying online about public safety on Capitol Hill? One person writes, "Hey, Seattle, please park some cops at the Shell gas station and/or have beat cops walk this neighborhood. It's absolutely necessary to have police presence to help prevent violence at this point." Another person says, "Stop fixing crime with cops. Doesn't work. Had 300 years of it not working. Need to address poverty." We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on social media. Great to get that input, and a big thanks to Chief Amy Barden from the Care Department, also Chris Paulus, Chair of the Capitol Hill Community Council, and also Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth from District 3. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time on City Inside Out.